I am Allison, 32 years old, and I have been dreading this family meeting for months. My siblings always had a way of making me feel small with their subtle jabs about my modest lifestyle. Little did they know the company I built from scratch had just sold for millions. I chose to drive a 10-year-old car and live simply because possessions never defined me. Their judgment about my worth was about to change dramatically today. The helicopter was just the beginning of their education. Before I dive into this story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated by your family. Trust me, what happens next is something you will not want to miss. Growing up as the middle child between my older brother James and younger sister Stephanie was never easy. James, now 40, always embodied everything my parents valued. He followed the traditional path through an Ivy League college to a prestigious corporate executive position at a Fortune 500 company. His corner office in Manhattan and vacation home in the Hamptons were frequent topics at family gatherings. Stephanie, 28, took a different route to success by marrying Andrew Eyre to a regional banking fortune. Her picture-perfect wedding was featured in several local magazines, and her life of charity galas and country club memberships fulfilled my parents' dreams for their youngest daughter. Then there was me, Allison, the middle child, who never quite fit the mold. Where James was calculated and traditional, and Stephanie was socially savvy and conventional. I was always questioning and seeking something different. My parents tried their best to provide equally for all three of us, but it became clear early on that my siblings and I had fundamentally different values. During high school, while James was student body president and Stephanie was homecoming queen, I was starting my first small business selling custom websites to local shops. My parents viewed it as a cute hobby that would eventually give way to a sensible career or marriage. When I announced I wanted to skip college to pursue entrepreneurship, the family reaction ranged from disappointment to outright intervention attempts. "You will regret this decision for the rest of your life," my father had said, refusing to make eye contact during that tense dinner 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I left our hometown of Cedar Springs with just $200 in my pocket and a determination to prove my path was valid. My family predicted I would be back within 6 months, humbled and ready to accept their version of success. When I did not return, they created their own narrative. That I was struggling but too proud to admit it, that my business ventures had failed, that I was barely scraping by in some tiny apartment in the city. In reality, my journey had been challenging, but ultimately successful beyond anything they could imagine. After several failed startups and nearly going bankrupt twice, my tech security company gained traction with a patent that revolutionized data protection for small businesses. 3 years of 18-hour workdays and ramen noodle dinners eventually led to a company valued at over $50 million. 6 months ago, a larger tech firm acquired us, making me wealthy beyond my wildest expectations. Yet I told none of this to my family. Each holiday call or rare visit home, I listened to their assumptions about my struggling lifestyle without correction. When James asked if I needed help with rent, or when Stephanie offered me her old designer clothes, I simply thanked them politely and changed the subject. It was easier than explaining why I chose to live modestly despite my success, that I valued experiences over possessions, that I was building schools in developing countries rather than buying mansions. The call about my parents came 3 weeks ago. Mom had fallen and broken her hip, and Dad's early-stage dementia was progressing faster than expected. They needed more care than they could afford on their retirement savings. James had called a family meeting to discuss options and financial responsibilities. His voice held the usual thinly veiled judgment when he asked if I could manage to come home and contribute whatever I could to their care. Now, as my flight prepared to land in the small regional airport near Cedar Springs, anxiety churned in my stomach. For years, I had maintained the emotional distance their judgment created, building a life and friendships with people who valued me for my ideas and character rather than my status. But family has a way of reducing even the most accomplished adult back to their childhood dynamics. Would this visit finally be the time I revealed the truth about my success, or would I continue to protect myself from their inevitable reactions, the shock, the awkward recalibration of our relationships, the questions about why I had kept it secret? As the plane touched down, I was still undecided. My parents needed help, and I had already arranged for the best care money could buy. But my siblings had no idea, and the family meeting promised to be another exercise in their condescension. My hands tightened around my deliberately average handbag as I prepared to step back into the complicated web of family expectations and judgments. The morning of my flight, I stood before my closet in my downtown loft, deliberately choosing the most understated items I owned. I selected faded jeans, a simple sweater with a small hole near the cuff, and comfortable sneakers that had seen better days. My assistant Margot watched with bewilderment as I packed similarly modest outfits in an old duffel bag rather than my usual sleek luggage. "You are worth $50 million, and you are dressed like a college student going home for the weekend," she observed, holding my usual itinerary folder. "And you are taking a commercial flight instead of the company jet because this is how they expect me to arrive," I replied, tucking my hair into a simple ponytail. "They have a very specific image of who I am, and I am not ready to disrupt that quite yet." On the flight, I found myself reflecting on why I maintained this facade. The truth was complicated. Part of me enjoyed the freedom of being underestimated. In the business world, I had learned that people who underestimated me often revealed more than they intended, giving me the upper hand in negotiations. With my family, their low expectations meant I never had to justify my choices or defend my success according to their metrics. But there was a deeper reason, one I rarely admitted even to myself. Their judgment had hurt me profoundly. When I first left home, their dismissal of my dreams cut deeper than I could acknowledge. Each patronizing comment about my phase of entrepreneurship, each suggestion that I should settle down like Stephanie or get a real job like James had accumulated into a protective wall I built around my true self. "Your problem, Allison, is that you have always been impractical," my brother had said during our last family Christmas 5 years ago. "Some people are meant to lead and innovate, others are meant to follow. There is no shame in accepting your limitations." That night, I had stepped outside to hide my tears, pretending to take a call while I composed myself. The irony was that earlier that same day, I had closed a deal that expanded our company internationally. My team had celebrated with champagne while I prepared to fly home to be treated like the family disappointment. The taxi from the airport drove through the familiar streets of Cedar Springs. The downtown area had barely changed. The same hardware store, my father frequented the ice cream shop where we celebrated school achievements, the park where I had first conceived of building my own business while watching people struggle. With early smartphones, everything seemed smaller now, preserved in amber, while my world had expanded beyond recognition. When the taxi pulled up to my childhood home, I felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with apprehension. The white two-story colonial with blue shutters had a new roof but was otherwise unchanged. The maple tree I had climbed as a child still dominated the front yard, and my mother's carefully tended garden bordered the walkway. For a moment, I was 10 years old again, running up those steps with a report card or art project, seeking approval I rarely felt I received fully. I paid the driver and took a deep breath before walking up the familiar path. Before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal James dressed in a cashmere sweater and pressed slacks, even though he was supposedly relaxing at home. "Finally," he said by way of greeting, checking his expensive watch. "We expected you hours ago. Did your flight get delayed, or did you have to take the bus from the airport?" His eyes took, in my deliberately casual appearance, a small, satisfied smile playing at his lips. "Good to see you too, James," I replied, giving him a brief hug that he returned stiffly. "The flight was fine. How are Mom and Dad?" "As well as can be expected, given the circumstances." He took my duffel bag, his expression mixing pity with superiority as he noted its worn condition. "I have been here since yesterday setting everything up. Stephanie and Andrew arrive tomorrow morning. You are in your old room, of course. Nothing has changed there." As I followed him inside, he continued without pause. "You know, if you need any help with expenses while you are here, just let me know. I know taking time off must be difficult for you financially." And there it was, the first of what would undoubtedly be many reminders of my perceived financial status. I could have corrected him, mentioned that my schedule was being handled by my executive team, or that money was the least of my concerns. Instead, I simply nodded and thanked him politely, maintaining the role they had assigned me in our family drama. Dad was dozing in his recliner in the living room, thinner than I remembered, and with more gray in his hair. Mom was in the kitchen, her movements slowed by her recent surgery, but her eyes bright with pleasure at seeing me. "Allison, sweetheart," she said, reaching for a hug. "You look—" She paused, searching for something positive to say about my deliberately downplayed appearance. "Healthy. Are you eating enough on your budget? You know you can always call if you need help with groceries." "I am fine, Mom," I assured her, helping her to a chair. "Tell me about your recovery. Are the doctors happy with your progress?" As we talked about her health, I could feel James hovering, interjecting with medical terms and treatment options he had researched. He had already compiled a binder of care facilities and in-home nursing options, complete with cost breakdowns and quality ratings. His organization was impressive, but came with an underlying assumption that he would be making the decisions with minimal input from me, the struggling middle child who could barely contribute financially. "We will go through everything in detail at the meeting tomorrow," he said, closing the binder. "But I wanted you to have time to process the realities of the situation. The quality care they need is not inexpensive." His emphasis on the cost was deliberate, a subtle reminder of what he perceived as my limited ability to contribute. I nodded thoughtfully, knowing that my offshore account already held more than enough to provide my parents with the best care for the rest of their lives, with plenty left over. But tonight was not the time for revelations. I needed to understand the full extent of my siblings' attitudes before deciding how to proceed. That evening, my mother insisted on preparing a family dinner despite her limited mobility. I offered to cook instead, but James had already arranged for a meal delivery service to bring a proper dinner, his way of implying that whatever I might prepare would be inadequate. The spread was admittedly impressive: roasted chicken, garlic, mashed potatoes, fresh vegetables, and an artisan bread that my mother kept exclaiming over. "This must have cost a fortune," she said, arranging the food on her best serving dishes. "James, you are always so generous." "It is nothing, Mom," he replied with practiced modesty. "The firm had an excellent quarter. Besides, we should enjoy these family moments while we can." The doorbell rang just as we were setting the table. Stephanie burst in with her trademark dramatic flair, her husband Andrew trailing behind, carrying multiple designer shopping bags. My sister looked like she had stepped out of a fashion magazine in her cashmere dress, and pearls her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the supposed hassle of travel. "We are here," she announced, embracing our mother carefully. And we brought gifts. She proceeded to distribute packages: an expensive bottle of scotch for Dad, a silk scarf for Mom, and a leather portfolio for James. When she reached me, her smile faltered slightly. "And for you, Allison, I thought you could use this." She handed me a smaller bag containing a gift card to a mid-range clothing store. "I noticed last time you visited that your wardrobe could use some refreshing," she explained, with what she probably thought was sisterly concern. "This should help you get a few professional pieces for job interviews." "Thank you," I said, evenly pocketing the card while ignoring the implication that I needed help finding employment. "How thoughtful." "Well, we all want to see you succeed," she replied with a patronizing pat on my arm. "Speaking of success, Andrew just made partner at his firm. We are celebrating by renovating the kitchen. Italian marble everywhere." Dinner conversation revolved around my siblings' achievements: James's recent promotion, Stephanie's fundraising gala that had raised thousands for the Children's Hospital, Andrew's golf tournament win at their Frenti Country Club. When the topic occasionally turned to me, it was always framed as gentle concern. "And what about you, Allison?" Stephanie asked, refilling her wine glass. "Any exciting developments in your— what is it you do again? Web design?" "Something like that," I replied vaguely, helping myself to more potatoes. "Small business solutions." "Still freelancing, then?" James cut in. "I know a few people who might need basic websites. Nothing major, but it could provide some steady income, more reliable than gig work." "I appreciate that," I said, swallowing both my pride and the urge to mention that my gig work had recently been valued at $50 million. Dad, who had been relatively quiet, suddenly focused on me. "Are you still in that tiny apartment? The one with the noisy neighbors?" That apartment had been 5 years and 3 residences ago. I now owned a penthouse overlooking the city park, but they did not need to know that yet. "I have a comfortable place," I answered truthfully. "Well, comfort is relative," Stephanie laughed. "Remember when Allison thought success meant making enough to buy name-brand cereal instead of the generic stuff?" As everyone chuckled at my apparent simplicity, the conversation inevitably turned to tomorrow's purpose: our parents' care needs. The reality is, James began shifting into his executive presentation mode that Mom and Dad need more support than Medicare will cover. Their retirement savings are substantial, but not infinite, especially considering the quality of care they deserve. "We have been looking at several options," Stephanie added. "There is a wonderful assisted living community near us. Very exclusive, but we know the director. The medical amenities are top-notch," Andrew contributed, "and the social environment would be perfect for them." Throughout this discussion, I noticed how they seamlessly used "we," while occasionally glancing my way with expressions that clearly excluded me from that collective decision-making. The message was clear. They were the successful ones who would handle the important decisions and financial arrangements. I was expected to contribute what little I could and be grateful for their generosity in not demanding more. Of course, these premium facilities come with premium costs. James continued directing this comment specifically to me, but Stephanie and I have discussed how we will handle the financial arrangements. "We want to be fair about the contributions," Stephanie added with false sweetness. "Everyone should contribute according to their means." "Which means we do not expect you to match our contributions," James clarified, as if doing me a great favor. "Whatever you can manage will be appreciated, even a token amount." I felt my cheeks burning with a mixture of anger and humiliation, not because I could not contribute, but because they had so completely written me off without ever asking about my actual situation. Years of assumptions and judgments had created a narrative about me that they accepted as absolute truth. "You have always had so much potential, Allison." My mother sighed, patting my hand. I still do not understand why you never finished that business degree. You could have been so successful like your brother. Different paths work for different people, Mom, I replied quietly. Not everyone measures success the same way. True, James nodded condescendingly. But some measures of success are more tangible than others. Security, stability, the ability to care for family, these are universal indicators that one's choices have been sound. As the subtle digs continued throughout dinner, I maintained my composure while internally debating my next move. Part of me wanted to reveal everything immediately, to see their expressions when they realized how wrong they had been about me all these years. But another part hesitated, wanting to understand the full extent of their assumptions before changing our family dynamic forever. By the time dessert was served, I had made my decision. Tomorrow's family meeting would be the moment of truth when they would learn that their struggling middle child had been more successful than they could have imagined, just not in the ways they had prescribed. The official family meeting began promptly at 9 the next morning in our parents' living room. James had set up his laptop and a small portable projector to display his meticulously prepared PowerPoint presentation titled Parental Care Options and Financial Considerations. Stephanie and Andrew sat on the love seat, matching in their business casual attire, while our parents occupied their usual chairs. I took the slightly wobbly ottoman in the corner, the least comfortable seat, which seemed fitting for my assigned role as the family afterthought. I have compiled comprehensive research on the top care options in the region. James began clicking through slides of upscale facilities with manicured grounds and elegant interiors. These three meet our criteria for quality medical care, social engagement opportunities, and proximity to family. Each facility he presented was increasingly luxurious, with price points to match. He detailed amenities like gourmet dining options, cultural excursions, and specialized memory care programs for Dad. The final option, clearly his preferred choice, was a newly opened continuing care community with separate apartments for independent living that could transition to higher levels of care as needed. This would allow Mom and Dad to maintain their autonomy while having immediate access to medical support, he explained. They would have a two-bedroom unit with a small garden terrace. The grounds include walking paths, a community center, and even a small golf course for Dad. It looks wonderful, Mom murmured, though I noticed the concern in her eyes as she glanced at Dad, who was struggling to follow the rapid presentation. Of course, premium care comes with premium costs, James continued, transitioning to a slide with a detailed breakdown of monthly expenses. The bottom line number caused our mother to gasp softly. This represents the gap between their retirement income and the actual costs. This is what we as a family need to address. Andrew, ever the finance professional, leaned forward. We have calculated how to distribute this responsibility equitably. Stephanie and I can cover 40%. And I can manage 45% through my bonus structure and investments, James added. That leaves 15%, which is approximately $1,200 monthly. All eyes turned to me. The unstated question hung in the air. Could I even afford to contribute my relatively small share? I remained silent, curious how they would frame their assumptions about my finances. Stephanie cleared her throat delicately. Allison, we know your situation is different from ours. If that amount is prohibitive, perhaps you could contribute in other ways. Maybe visit more often to provide personal care instead. We do not want to create hardship, James added, with the patronizing tone he reserved specially for me. Perhaps 500 monthly would be more manageable for your budget. Stephanie and I could adjust our contributions to cover the difference. How generous of you, I remarked quietly, noting how they had already decided what I could and could not afford without ever asking me directly. "We just want what is best for Mom and Dad," Stephanie said, her voice carrying a hint of defensiveness. "Those of us who can contribute more should do so." Dad, who had been quiet throughout the presentation, suddenly focused on me. "Do you even have a steady job now, Allison? Last we talked, you were between projects." Before I could answer, James interjected. "I have actually been meaning to discuss that. My company has an entry-level marketing position opening up. The salary would be modest by our standards, but for someone in Allison's position, it would provide stability and benefits." I could put in a word. "That is so thoughtful," Stephanie beamed at our brother. "A real job with a real company would make such a difference for you, Allison." The condescension was becoming unbearable. They had created such a complete narrative about my supposed failures that they could not even imagine I might have built something successful on my own terms. "I appreciate the thought," I said carefully, "but I am comfortable with my current professional situation." James exchanged a knowing look with Stephanie. "Being comfortable and being secure are different things, Allison. At some point, you need to think practically. You cannot couch surf and do freelance work forever." "Couch surf?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "Well, you mentioned having roommates last time we spoke," Stephanie said. "And you never invite any of us to visit, which suggests your living situation might be temporary." I had never mentioned roommates. What I had said was that I had a house manager and personal assistant who sometimes stayed at my place, hardly the same thing. And I had never invited them because their judgment and assumptions made visits unpleasant. "I do not couch surf," I stated firmly. "I have a stable living situation." "But not stable enough to afford reliable transportation, right?" James pressed. "I noticed you took a taxi from the airport instead of driving yourself. Do you even own a car these days?" The conversation had veered into territory so divorced from reality that I almost wanted to laugh. Instead, I simply said, "I have transportation arrangements that work for me." "Allison has always been our free spirit," Mom interjected clearly, trying to smooth over the tension. "Not everyone needs material success to be happy." "That is a convenient philosophy when material success seems out of reach," James muttered, just loudly enough for everyone to hear. That comment was the tipping point. 10 years of condescension and judgment crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. They were never going to see me clearly unless I forced them to confront their misconceptions. "Let us get back to the main issue," Andrew suggested, oblivious to the tension. "Can you manage the 500 per month, Allison? It is important we finalize the numbers today." "I need to make a quick call first," I said, pulling out my phone. "It will just take a minute." "Now is not really the time for personal calls," James said with irritation. "We are in the middle of important family business." I ignored him and dialed my assistant Margot. "Hey, it is me. Is everything set for today?" I paused, listening. "Perfect. Go ahead with the arrival in 15 minutes. Yes, the front lawn is big enough. Thanks." I ended the call and turned back to my confused family. "Sorry about that. Just confirming my transportation." "Did you arrange for another taxi?" "We are not finished here," James said, with growing annoyance. "Not exactly a taxi," I replied, settling back into my seat. "Now about those care options. I actually have another facility to suggest. It opened last year, about 20 minutes from here. It has an exceptional memory care program and has been recognized nationally for its innovative approach." "I researched every quality facility within 50 miles, James said dismissively. "If it were worth considering, it would be in my presentation." "This one is quite exclusive," I continued calmly. "They only accept private clients through their foundation. No public listings." "And how exactly would you know about an exclusive unlisted care facility?" Stephanie asked with a laugh. I smiled slightly. I know because I funded it. The Westbrook Senior Health Foundation is my project. A confused silence fell over the room. James recovered first. What do you mean, your project? You cannot possibly be suggesting you have the resources to fund a healthcare facility. That is exactly what I am suggesting, I replied. This is ridiculous, he scoffed. Next, you will tell us you own a yacht and a private island. No island, I said with a small smile. Not yet, anyway. Allison, if this is your idea of a joke, it is not funny, Stephanie said sharply. We are trying to have a serious discussion about our parents' future. I assure you, I am being completely serious, I replied. Right, James laughed derisively. The same sister who cannot even afford a car suddenly owns a healthcare foundation. Makes perfect sense. As if on cue, the distinctive sound of helicopter blades cutting through the air became audible, growing louder by the second. My family's conversation halted as the noise became impossible to ignore. What on earth? My mother exclaimed, moving toward the window. Outside, a sleek black helicopter was descending onto their spacious front lawn, the downwash from its rotors bending the grass and shaking the branches of the maple tree.